Back to the Future is one of the greatest film trilogies of all time. I realize, of course, you might have different favorites, but Lord of the Rings has never done anything for me. Watching Star Wars as an adult just feels empty and meaningless. There's just nothing there for me anymore. Toy Story, of course, is now a quadrilogy, so does not fit the trilogy category. That leaves Back to the Future at the top. I have watched these movies repeatedly since they debuted. We host exchange students regularly, and I love showing them these movies. We hosted a girl from Thailand, Lisa, this past year, and it was great showing her these films to give her a taste of what life in the United States was like in the mid-'80s when I was growing up. It was exactly like that. Yes. So year 2020 is the 35th anniversary of the Back to the Future debut, and we have not one, but 2 games about the Back to the Future IP. Yes, apparently production companies Universal and Amblin Entertainment thought it would be amusing to pit Funko Games and Ravensburger against one another with game licenses coming out at roughly the exact same time. Seems fitting for the IP. For this video, I'll be focusing on Back to the Future Dice Through Time, a design by Chris Leader, Ken Franklin, and Kevin Rogers. It's a 2 to 4 player game that takes place over the entire trilogy. So just as in Back to the Future 2, when you have multiple Martys running around, you are going to have multiple Marty and Docs and DeLoreans running around in Back to the Future Dice Through Time. You are traveling through the years 1885 to the future of 2015, trying to resolve paradoxes and return items to their proper places in the timeline. You can increase the difficulty of the game as you like in order to make it as challenging as you want. Let me show you how this works. Here are the components for Back to the Future Dice Through Time, set up for a 4-player game. Each player takes 4 dice and the matching colored DeLorean that starts at the clock tower location of the appropriate timeline. There are 20 locations in total on the game board, and these locations are used for the event cards in the event card deck, as well as the item cards. You must return these items to the proper locations in the proper timeline in order to win the game. I've set this up with 2 items in each of the timelines. You can start with 2, 3, 4, or 5 items. In order to make the game more difficult for yourself, add in more items. If the out-of-time marker reaches 12 on the out-of-time tracker before you return all of these items, then the space-time continuum dissipates and everyone loses because they no longer exist. Or maybe they're happy that way. I don't know. There's no traitor in this game, but perhaps philosophically speaking, you'd be okay with that. You must return all of these items, and to do that, you are going to move through locations within the same time and through time. To set up at the beginning of each round, you are going to reveal 3, 5, or 8 events from the deck based on the number of players in the game. You put those event cards at their proper locations, as indicated here with their color and name showing where things go. Each card has 1 or more icons on it, and to ensure that this event takes place as it should, you must be in that location and use those symbols. There are 3 cards for each location. Some cards have a chicken on them, and that shows that Biff comes over when such a card is revealed, because Biff wants to cause trouble, of course. Biff might be there anyway, whether or not a chicken card is on there. And now all the cards are out. All the players roll their dice. And starting with whoever has the first player marker, you are going to take turns doing things. Oh, what are you going to do? Well, it depends on the icons that you roll. If you have a flux capacitor, you can travel through time. And that's good. However, I don't want to mess with anyone else, because if you appear in the same space with another player, that causes a paradox and you advance the out-of-time marker. So you probably don't want to do that. You can spend any 1 die to move 1 space left or right in the same timeline. If you have an arrow, you can move to any location within the same timeline. So I can move 1 space. I can use a flux capacitor to go through time while staying in the same location. So I can go to Blast for the Past. I can spend any 2 icons that match, thanks to Mr. Fusion, as an icon of my choice. So I can spend these 2 fists instead as an arrow, and I can resolve this Blast from the Past event. When you empty out a space, you get one of the item cards and you put it down here on your board, and you are the person who must return this item to this location and time. So I need to bring this stove door to the saloon. Okay, but I'm out of dice. I can do nothing else for this time, so my turn is done. If you get a lightning bolt, you can re-roll symbols to try to get things that you want. In this case, nothing helps me here. But you can also look to see what other people have, and maybe they can do something. Let's say the orange player wants to spend this to re-roll these 3 dice. Sure. Perfect. Okay. Then the orange player can spend a fist to travel to this location. I could spend a fist to punch Biff to another location in the same timeline, but I'm not trying to do anything here. I can do something else though, which is I can leave a die for another player. So I can put this wrench here, and then the pink player can pick this up on their turn because this item is here in this location. Anyone else who comes to 1985 can use this wrench, or someone in a future time can use this wrench. No one in the past can because, of course, the wrench isn't there in the past. It's only here from 1985 to the future. So when the brown player goes, if the brown player left a wrench here, then any player can use the wrench at any point. You see, I like knocking over Biff. So the orange player still has an extra die. Maybe they'll just spend this to go over to this location and they can hopefully tackle this next time, even though they don't have anything now and that event's still going to stay there. For the pink player, they can spend a fist to resolve this clock tower event, and they will get this item. They have to return the clock tower flyer to the clock tower location. They can spend this to, no, they'll spend this to go to a adjacent location. They will spend this fist to punch Biff somewhere because you cannot resolve an event while Biff is standing there. You have to get Biff out of the way. And now they have an arrow as well as this wrench, and they can resolve this event as well. There are no more item cards, so it doesn't matter in terms of getting events, but getting items, but you still want to resolve the event cards anyway, which I'll show at the end of this turn. The brown player has no arrows, they have no lightning bolt, so they can't re-roll. They do have a flux capacitor, and they do have a wrench and dock. So we'll spend 1 die going here, spend a flux capacitor going down, spend dock and the wrench to resolve this Lou's Cafe. The brown player will get this item. They need to return the skateboard to Marty's house. All right, we're right in line for doing that next time. It's the end of the round. All the players have taken their turns. You're going to look at each year, and you're going to see how many locations still have events on them. In this case, this timeline has 1 event, 1 event, 1 event, none. Whichever timeline has the most locations that still have events on them, you advance the out-of-time marker by that many spaces. So it's only 1. And if there's a tie, you're going to choose the earliest year. You then put a paradox marker on each of those locations that still has events on them. And next, at the end of next round, if you were choosing, if say there's lots of events here for 1885, you have 3 events, you're going to advance this 3 spaces, and then if there's any paradox markers in this row, you advance it 1 additional space. So you must resolve as many events as possible and remove paradox markers in order to keep bad things from happening. For the next round, you advance the first player marker, you're going to turn over more events, and as you turn over events, you might have a special yellow event. So this is going to take place. Sometimes they're good, such as not this one. Players may not use Mr. Fusion this round. Or arrow icons only move you 1 space this round instead of anywhere within the same timeline. Sometimes they're good, such as remove all paradox tokens from the board. So there's a number of events mixed through the deck, and those will show up at random, in addition to actual event cards that you must resolve. So the randomness of the cards coming out is going to affect where you want to go in time because you're trying to keep the out-of-time marker from advancing too far. If you have, as I've had, you have all 5 locations in a year with events, you definitely want to strike down as many of those as possible. So you're trying to all travel to that timeline in order to resolve those events, but of course without getting in each other's way, because you'll advance the marker anyway if you advance to a location where someone else is. There's the general flow of a round. You reveal the event cards, lay them out in the proper locations, all players roll their dice, and you're going to figure out who is going to tackle what based on what they have available to them and where they already are. Because any player can resolve any event or events as long as they have the proper icons. A few more notes about the icons. The Doc Brown icon can be spent to remove any 2 paradox tokens from anywhere on the board. The wrench serves as a joker, so sometimes you specifically need a wrench to resolve a particular event, but the wrench can also serve for any icon to resolve an event. The game starts easy because, of course, you only have a few event cards to begin with, but you have 3, 5, or 8 events for a game with 2, 3, or 4 players, so in general, you're not going to resolve all the events in a round, and they're going to build up over time and create roadblocks for the future as you are trying to return items to their proper locations, which is the main focus for the game. You have to keep that in mind. You're not necessarily trying to resolve all the events, except, of course, you're trying not to run out of time. But as long as you get those items back to their proper locations, that is your focus. Here we are set up for the second round with all the event cards laid out. All players roll their dice, you get set to play. Everyone except the orange player has an item that they want to return to a particular location. Your role varies in the game depending on what you roll. Sometimes you're more the supporting player, sometimes you're the active player. It really varies just depending on what you're doing and which things you have available to you. So in this case, you're looking ahead to see that the brown player wants to go to Marty's house, and this year, as the pink player wants to go here, well, I can use a die to go here, and then spend, oh, no, I'll use the Doc Brown to go here, and then I'll spend the arrow and the lightning bolt to remove this event, which gives me an item because I cleared a space. And now I can use the flux capacitor to move out of that time, because if you ever appear in the same timeline as someone else, you advance this marker 2 spaces, which is very bad since you only need to go to 12 in order to lose the game. That doesn't help the pink player get to the clock tower. The pink player has no fist. They only have some Doc Browns. Well, you can... I could spend a flux capacitor. I could spend this to go 1 space. I can spend these 2 as a fist and clear Biff out. And they'll be set for next time, assuming nothing else happens to bring Biff there, and hopefully I can get a Doc Brown to clear things out in the future. Okay, well, the yellow player, flux capacitor, goes to Marty's house, returns this, and you get a bonus. Whenever you return an item to the proper location, well, you return that item, you can put it under the board so you know it's resolved. You get to remove the out of time marker back 1 space, and you draw an Einstein token and put it up on the board here, and now any player has access to any of the tokens here. So there is a wrench in the future for anyone who needs it in order to resolve different events, or possibly have a fist to punch Biff out of the way or move through time. There's an overview of Back to the Future Dice Through Time, which I played 3 times on a review copy from Ravensburger, once with 2 players and twice with 4. We won only 1 of those 3 games, and they were all played on the beginner setting with only 2 items in each year. So the game is already difficult, and you can make it far more difficult if you wish. The challenge, of course, is that you have a constant flow of events coming in relative to the number of actions you have available to you. You have only 4 dice, but there's going to be more events coming out than you can possibly tackle, especially since you need to use some of those dice to travel within a timeline to a different location, or through timelines, or to move Biff out of the way, or possibly just to re-roll because you don't have anything that you can use effectively. Your whole goal is returning those items to the proper location, but of course you have to watch out for things building up. As you saw with the example in the second round, the brown player still had some more actions to take. The blue player had not gone yet, but the 1985 year had 4 locations that still had events in them. So that out of time marker was going to jump up 4 spaces unless we took care of some of those. And that really sets you back, because 0 to 12 seems like a lot of space, but you can jump up extremely quickly. And then you slowly go back as you return the item cards. You step back 1 at a time, and you pile up the Einstein tokens. Possibly they'll be useful, possibly not. It depends, because of course you have a limited number of them available and they feel very precious to you, or you don't necessarily want to spend them right away. Is it really the right time? Do we really need to do this now? How critical is it? Sometimes you know it is, because once you start piling up 2 or 3 event cards on a location, they're extremely tough to tackle because you have to get them all at once, which means you have to roll exactly the right thing, or you have the Einstein tokens available, or people have left dice for you in order for you to use them with whatever you get on your turn. The ability to leave a die in time for a future player, whether in the future or at that same year, is brilliant. It's a great use of the time travel trope, the sort of trickery that's available in time travel. It works fantastically well, and it feels really good when you can make those connections in order to have everything work out the right way. The trick, of course, is you can leave a die there and you don't know if it's going to be useful because it'll depend on what people roll on the next turn. And so you roll 1 fewer die, so you can't do as much because this 1 die is locked, and hopefully it's going to be useful. If you want, after the event cards are revealed, you can pull a die off the board or all your dice back so that you can roll them. It's a great challenge to try to figure out what's the best way to do things. Clearly, I don't know it yet because we have not had a good record in what we're doing, but it's just a great use of the time travel element itself, just to have the dice flowing through there. It's great use of having the multiple Martys, the multiple DeLoreans going around, where you have to work collectively and yet somehow avoid each other. It's very in spirit to the movie. It captures that element really well. There's a couple little wonky elements. The ability to spend any die in order to move to an adjacent location. It feels a bit like an add-on to make sure that things can happen the right way, because all the dice have particular functions: move through time, move within time, fight Biff, remove paradoxes, resolve events, or reroll. They're all very straightforward and sort of iconic, and then it feels a little bolted on that you can spend any die in order to move to one location adjacently. Although without that, you cannot possibly win because you use that over and over again. They use 2 dice for any random, any icon of your choice. It also feels like it's to get you out of trouble, because if you didn't have that option, again, you often could not do things just because you don't roll the right icons. So it feels a bit out of touch, or a bit clunky, I'll say, but it works with what you're trying to do. You need those abilities, and they're there in order for you to use them in the game. So the game has a very puzzly feel to it because, again, you lay out the icons or the event cards, you roll all the dice, and then you see sort of who's going to do what. And for the most part, unless people are going to roll lightning bolts and mix things up, the round's kind of laid out for what's possible to you. What's the best way to use the dice in order to remove the most things? So there's not an element of chance, except for the lightning rerolls, once you initially roll the dice. You have everything laid out to you, and you sort of see what you can tackle and puzzle things out. So it's sort of along the lines of the pandemic puzzle solver, where people can lay out everything in advance and see what's available to you, what's the best use, how we're going to set up for the future. And then hopefully you'll get to the end of the round and things won't be too bad in terms of how far you go, and then you'll see what's available to you next. There you go. Quick overview of Back to the Future Dice Through Time.